to the entertaining Talkin' Sports.
What is going on, football fans? Back at it with another New York Giants video. We're going to dive into a couple of things in this video. I wanted to talk about an article that came out yesterday that a lot of you guys wanted me to speak on regarding Jason Garrett that was written by Jason LaConfora on CBS Sports. I'll pull up some of the quotes there, and I'll kind of talk about why I think it's nonsense. I think he's trying to make up a story that really probably isn't there. Now, the reason why some people may feel there may be something to that, well, obviously, Mark Colombo came over from Jason Garrett, and the Giants just went out and they fired Mark Colombo. Him and Garrett had a good working relationship. He was the offensive line coach for Garrett while he was a head coach at Dallas. I'll speak more on that as we get along in the video. I also wanted to talk about some news regarding the New York Giants roster. Of course, it came out about 4 or 5 days ago that the New York Giants had a number of players on the COVID list or close contact list. They had 6 in total, that being the kicker Graham Gano, Casey Crider the long snapper, Riley Dixon the punter, Caden Smith, Matt Barrett, and Dante Pettis. As far as Dante Pettis goes, well, I'm excited to see him on the field whenever he gets the opportunity. May not be this week. He hasn't done anything yet. The same could really be said for Matt Barrett, even though he has played a bit. He's not in the starting lineup. Caden Smith, if he is unable to play, which it looks like it's at least a possibility, could certainly hurt the New York Giants. He's actually gone, even though he doesn't have a lot of catches, I think he's only got 14 on the year. He's been a very good blocker for the New York Giants, specifically in the H-back role. So if you ask me, outside of Gano, who may or may not play, luckily for him, it was a bit earlier in the week. I think it's 10 days that you have to sit out. He was the first one that it was called upon. I think the 10-day waiting period would, he would be able to make it back if he tested positive before the game. So we'll have to wait and see there. He would be the biggest hurt, along with Caden Smith. Now, the good news is there were 2 players that were close contacts, that being Casey Crider and Riley Dixon. I'm assuming because they're probably in the same room as Gano, the kicker. They're back on the practice field. They've been cleared to play. So the New York Giants will have their punter and they will have their long snapper. So that is important for this football game. In addition to that, the New York Giants called up, well, not called up, but now they've announced are practicing both X-Men. Xavier McKinney was out there on the football field with the New York Giants getting ready for the Cincinnati Bengals along with Oshane Ximines. Ximines was a prospect that a lot of us had high hopes for coming into the year, and he got injured early in the season, and the Giants could use as much help as they could possibly get at that edge rusher position. Not to mention, he needs some more progression. He's still a young prospect. The more games he could play, the better, as the New York Giants continue to evaluate who may or may not be a part of the future of this franchise. Now, Ximines, even before the injury, if you remember, wasn't getting a ton of playing time. But with the injuries to this Giants roster, I would think Ximines will get all the snaps he can handle when he proves he's good and ready. I think they may start to slowly integrate both of these players back into the lineup, however. And I'm as excited as anybody about Xavier McKinney being back with the New York Giants, but do I expect him to get a full allotment of snaps week 1 against the Bengals, a rookie who hasn't played an NFL game yet due to the injuries that he suffered? Absolutely not. I think the Giants will find a role. I think he'll be in there in certain packages. Now, the question is, when he does get back to 100%, who sees the biggest decrease in terms of playing time? And I pointed a lot to Julian Love. Love has been kind of the third safety. They moved him around a bit. But with McKinney coming back, and you still have Logan Ryan on this roster who's played phenomenal, I would think Love may get his playing time taken away unless they try to convert Love to that as that second corner on the outside. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out, but I can't really see them cutting too much into Logan Ryan's playing time. He's gotten more snaps than anybody else, and he's one of the biggest leaders of this defense, a big Joe Judge guy, and a guy I expect to be back here next year, whether it's playing the slot or whether it's playing that safety position. Just a versatile piece, a heads-up player that the New York Giants will try to integrate in. In addition to that, you have Darnay Holmes. So it's going to be interesting to see what role they carve out for McKinney, and it could be a week-by-week basis. Like Joe Judge and Patrick Graham said at the beginning of the season, it's kind of matchup dependent. It depends on who they're playing as to how they're going to, and you've seen that all year. There's been some games where certain players, Holmes, for example, I don't think got many snaps a couple of weeks ago, and then he gets a lot more the next week. So we'll see how they manage this defense and who gets more playing time. But if I had to guess, Julian Love will probably see the biggest decrease in playing time unless they try to play him on the outside. But I wanted to jump into some of the quotes today, and then I want to give my full opinion on the Jason Garrett story. First thing I'm going to pull up for you guys is this. This was the tweet from Ian Rappaport, just confirming that they're on the practice squad and that Dixon and Casey Crider were activated from the COVID reserve list. Help is on the way for the Giants. Safety Xavier McKinney and pass rusher Oshane Ximines have been designated for return and will practice. Punter Riley Dixon and long snapper Casey Kreider were activated from the COVID reserve list. So that's the great news of the day regarding the roster. Now, this was the article written by Jason Garrett of CBS. And to be completely honest with you, kind of like what I said at the top of the video, I think it is nonsense. And I'm going to get more into it as I read the quotes. There is a strong expectation that more staff overhaul is coming in 2021. A new offensive coordinator next season would not surprise several sources who know Judge well. And I'm not saying it's impossible. Maybe Judge doesn't like what he's seeing. We're going to have to wait and see how it all plays out. Sources said there's been friction and turmoil within other aspects of that staff as well, with offensive coordinator Jason Garrett under scrutiny and a change at the key staff position a very real possibility in 2021. Judge was one of just 5 new head coaches hired in 2020. Well, that number could double next year, flooding the market with coordinators and assistant coaches looking for work. Options will be abound, and Judge has already displayed that he will not shy away from making a bold, if not shocking, move, even if it comes at a less than opportune time. And there, of course, they're referring to Mark Colombo. Colombo and him, of course, got into a fight. Judge didn't like what he saw. As far as Garrett goes, to me, Garrett is a proven play caller, and a lot of people have pointed to the fact that Garrett may not be happy with Judge and the New York Giants making this decision, being that he was a Colombo guy, and I think that Garrett had a lot of influence on that decision. Garrett promoted Colombo. But here's the thing. You would think Garrett would understand more than anybody, a head coach making this move, right? Because Garrett did it in 2018. He fired his offensive line coach about this point in the season because he didn't feel he was getting the job done, and he brought in Mark Colombo. And Jason Garrett knows more than anybody that that's what you have. Those are the types of decisions that you have to make as a head coach. You're not there to be everybody's best friend. The other thing I'll say is Jason Garrett has come out and said since he's been here that he's actually been learning things from Joe Judge. He's been incredibly encouraged by him, and he thinks he's going to be a great head coach. So, and Judge also came out in the press conference today and said that their relationship has not been affected at all. Now, maybe they're just being politically correct. They're not trying to stir up drama with the headlines. Anything is possible. As far as replacing Garrett, I think it would be a catastrophic mistake. That's just my honest opinion, especially if you're keeping on Daniel Jones, which at this point in time, I think we all agree Daniel Jones will more than likely be the quarterback in 2021. So why do I think it would be a catastrophic mistake? After all, Daniel Jones didn't get off to such a great start. Well, here's the deal. First off, let's talk about the progression of this offense. The New York Giants started out only averaging just under 12 points a game through their first 4 contests. They were horrible. They were awful. Worst offense in the league, and it wasn't close. And some people blame Garrett. I pointed a lot more to the inexperienced offensive line and the team learning the scheme. Anybody could see with a pair of eyes that the offensive line was completely lost the first 4 weeks of the season. Then they started to click. Well, over the last 6 weeks, the New York Giants have scored 20 points or more in all 6 contests. That's the first time since 2014 that the New York Giants have had 6 consecutive games with 20 points or more, in which they're averaging 24 points a game, which would put them around league average for an offense that is missing their best playmaker in Saquon Barkley and an offensive line that should only get better going into next year. After all, they're still experimenting. They're moving players around on that offensive line as they're starting to hit their stride. So with all that being said, you've already forced Daniel Jones to learn a second scheme in his second year. And we saw the process, and we'll see how it plays out over the last 6 games. But we saw the process in him having to learn that new scheme in year 2. If you were then to fire Garrett in the offseason and bring in a third offensive play caller, I think it would just spell disaster. I look at a guy like Alex Smith. Alex Smith went through like 5 or 6 offensive coordinators in his first 6 or 7 years in the NFL, and he never really hit his stride until such time he had stability. You can't keep changing schemes for your quarterback. You have to pick one, and you have to stick with it. The Giants elected to bring in Jason Garrett. This offense is starting to show signs of progression. It would be a monumental mistake, in my opinion, if you were to move on. Now, who would the New York Giants hire if they decided to move on? Who knows? It might be the quarterback coach who they brought over from Miami. I've talked about him several times in Jerry Shulplinski. He's thought to be a very smart guy. Maybe they would want familiarity with Daniel Jones, but the more schemes you ask this guy to learn, well, that's just going to stunt the growth of your quarterback and ultimately the growth of the 2021 football team. I'm all about keeping Jason Garrett aboard. I think the offense has shown signs of growth. Maybe some people will credit that more to Judge. Maybe some people will credit that more to Garrett. And I don't have access to what goes on behind the closed doors. But to my knowledge, everything that I heard before the year started, Garrett was all aboard the Judge train. Maybe he feels offended that he fired Colombo, but at the end of the day, what can Garrett really say? Garrett did the same thing to his offensive line coach in 2018, and Garrett knows that if he ever wants to get another head coaching gig, he probably should stick around and see this offense progress year 2, and maybe he'll get another opportunity somewhere else. To me, all signs point to Garrett being back next year, but maybe that'll change. We'll have to wait and see. As always, guys, if you liked what you watched, please subscribe. Drop a comment. Maybe give me a little thumbs up. Cheers.